The woman almost didn't notice the dog at first. It was close to midnight, and the quiet convenience store had just emptied for the night. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed softly above her head as she wiped down the counter one last time before closing. Outside, rain had just stopped falling. Thin mist drifted slowly across the empty street, and the pavement shimmered under the dull glow of a tired street lamp. It was the kind of night where the city felt strangely silent, and the kind of silence that made even the smallest movement feel loud. That was when she looked up and saw it. A German shepherd, standing perfectly still outside the glass doors. Not pacing, not barking, just staring inside the store. At first, she assumed it belonged to someone nearby. Maybe its owner had stepped inside another shop down the street. But something about the dog felt strange. It wasn't restless like most stray animals. It looked calm, focused, almost like it was waiting. For nearly 20 minutes, the dog remained there. Customers came and went. Cars passed down the street. But the dog never moved. It simply watched. Eventually, the store closed. The woman switched off the lights, locked the doors, and stepped outside into the cold night air. The dog immediately stood up. Not aggressively, not nervously, just calmly. Then it began walking down the street. Slowly. After a few steps, the dog stopped, turned its head, and looked directly back at her, as if asking her to follow. The woman hesitated. Something deep in her instincts told her to ignore it and walk the other way. But curiosity won. She followed. One step, then another. The quiet street stretched into darkness ahead of them. The dog continued walking, guiding her deeper into the night. Until suddenly, the dog stopped. Right in the middle of the road, the woman slowed to a halt behind it. Then she saw the car. Black. Parked beneath a dim streetlight. Its headlights glowed faintly through the fog. And standing beside it was a tall shadow. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching them. The dog sat down calmly. But the woman felt her heart begin to race. Because in that moment, she realized something terrifying. The stray dog hadn't been wandering. It had been leading her straight to the Mafia boss. Before we continue, if you enjoy mysterious stories like this one, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight. Your support helps these stories reach more people who love suspense and late-night storytelling. Now, let's go back to that cold, silent street. Because what happened next would completely change the woman's life forever. The convenience store where the woman worked sat on the edge of an old neighborhood where the city seemed to forget time existed. During the day, the streets bustled with life. Construction workers grabbed quick lunches, delivery drivers rushed in for coffee, neighbors stopped by for groceries. But after dark, everything changed. The streets emptied, the noise faded, and the neighborhood became quiet enough that even distant footsteps echoed. The woman had worked the night shift there long enough to recognize every regular customer. She knew which taxi drivers stopped for snacks at midnight, which truck drivers came in around 2 a.m., and which late-night college students wandered in looking for energy drinks. But that night, the dog wasn't one of the regulars. She first noticed it around 11:30 p.m. At first, it was just a silhouette outside the glass door. Large. Still. Watching. She assumed someone had tied their dog outside while shopping somewhere nearby. But the minutes passed, and the dog never moved. Eventually, curiosity got the better of her. She walked closer to the door. The dog didn't bark, didn't step back. It simply sat there beneath the streetlight. Calm, quiet, almost patient. And when their eyes met, something about the dog made her feel uneasy. Not frightened, just confused. It didn't behave like a stray animal. Strays usually looked hungry, tired, nervous. But this dog looked strong, alert, like it had a purpose. A customer noticed it too. "Looks like you got a guard dog tonight," the man joked while paying for his drinks. The woman laughed politely. But deep down, she couldn't shake the strange feeling that the dog wasn't guarding the store. It was waiting. Waiting for something. or someone. And as the final customers left and the clock moved closer to midnight, the dog remained exactly where it was, watching, waiting, silent. The woman turned off the store lights and locked the door. Then she stepped outside into the cool night air. The moment her foot touched the pavement, the dog stood up, slowly, and without hesitation. It began walking down the street, not running, not wandering, walking with purpose. Then, after a few steps, it stopped, turned its head, and looked back at her, almost as if to say, "Come with me." The woman's heart was still racing when the man stopped walking. The street had grown completely silent again, except for the soft hum of the car engine behind him and the distant dripping of rainwater from the rooftops. For a long moment, none of them moved. The woman remained crouched where she was, her hands resting on her knees, trying to steady her breathing. The German shepherd stood several feet in front of her, its body perfectly still. Its ears were upright, its posture alert, and its eyes were fixed directly on the tall figure standing in front of the car. The man hadn't spoken yet. He simply watched the dog. Something about the way he stood there made the woman uneasy. It wasn't just the darkness of the street. It wasn't just the headlights cutting through the mist behind him. It was the way he carried himself. Calm, confident, completely unafraid. Even with a large dog standing directly in his path. The woman slowly rose to her feet. The movement felt awkward, like her legs had forgotten how to stand properly. Her eyes moved back and forth between the dog and the man. Neither of them had taken their eyes off each other. It was as if they were locked in some silent understanding she wasn't part of. Finally, the man spoke. His voice was deep and calm. "Is that your dog?" The question seemed strange. For a moment, the woman didn't even know how to respond. She shook her head quickly. No, I don't think so." Her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. The man looked back down at the dog. The animal hadn't moved, not even an inch. That was the strange part. Most dogs would have barked. Most would have backed away from a stranger approaching them in the middle of a dark street. But this one didn't do either. It simply stood there, watching, waiting. The man slowly took another step forward. The sound of his shoe against the wet pavement echoed softly through the empty street. Still, the dog didn't move. The woman felt a chill crawl slowly up her spine. She couldn't explain why, but the tension between the man and the dog felt almost familiar, as if they had crossed paths before. The man stopped a few feet away from the animal now, close enough that the light from the headlights revealed his face more clearly. The woman noticed things she hadn't seen before. A faint scar along his jaw, sharp eyes that moved carefully over every detail in front of him, and something else, something colder, the kind of quiet authority that made people instinctively lower their voices when he entered a room. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the dog's eye level. The dog tilted its head, not aggressive, not afraid, just studying him. The man spoke again, almost as if he were talking to the dog instead of the woman. "Yeah, you brought her here." The woman frowned. "What?" The man stood up slowly. His eyes shifted toward her now. "This dog doesn't lead strangers down dark streets." The woman blinked. "I didn't follow him on purpose," she said quickly. "I mean, I was just leaving the store and he kept looking back at me. Then he started walking and..." She stopped talking. Suddenly, the explanation sounded ridiculous. Why had she followed the dog in the first place? She wasn't even sure herself. Yet the man's gaze remained steady. The kind of gaze that made it feel like he could see every nervous thought passing through her mind. Then he glanced back down at the dog again. The animal hadn't moved from its position, but now it turned its head slightly, just enough to glance back toward the woman. The woman felt her stomach tighten. It was almost like the dog was checking on her, making sure she was still there, or making sure she was safe. The man noticed it too. A small crease appeared in his brow. "That's interesting." The woman shifted nervously. "What is?" The man straightened his coat slowly. "This dog doesn't stay near people." His voice carried a quiet certainty. but it hasn't left you. The woman looked down at the German shepherd. Now that she was standing, she realized how large it really was. Its thick fur was damp from the mist. Its eyes were bright and intelligent, and somehow calm. Not like a stray, more like an animal that had chosen to be exactly where it was. The woman whispered softly, "I think it followed me from the store." The man shook his head. "No." His answer came quickly, almost immediately. "This dog doesn't follow people." The woman's confusion deepened. "Then why is it here?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes slowly drifted down the dark end of the street behind her. The dog suddenly turned its head in the same direction, why its ears lifted higher. Its entire posture stiffened. The woman felt the shift instantly. Something had changed. The air itself suddenly felt heavier. "What is it?" she asked quietly. The man's expression had become serious now, much more serious. "Did you see anyone else when you came down this street?" The woman shook her head. "No." It was empty. The dog took a small step forward, not toward the man, but toward the darkness behind him, watching, listening, and the man followed the dog's gaze. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then he spoke quietly. "Stay where you are." The command was directed at the woman, but something about the tone made it feel less like a request and more like an order. The woman didn't move. She couldn't. The dog let out a very low growl, soft, barely audible, but enough to send another cold chill through the woman's chest. Whatever the dog had noticed, it wasn't good. And judging by the way the man's calm expression had completely vanished, he knew it too. The quiet street suddenly didn't feel empty anymore. Someone else was nearby. The low growl from the German shepherd seemed to vibrate through the quiet street. It was barely audible. But in the stillness of the night, it sounded louder than thunder. The woman felt her chest tighten immediately. The dog had not made that sound before. Not when it first appeared outside the store. Not when it led her down the street. Not even when the tall man stepped out of the car. But now something had changed. The animal's ears were standing perfectly upright. Its body had stiffened, and its eyes were no longer focused on the man in front of them. They were staring into the darkness behind him. The woman instinctively turned her head in the same direction. At first, she saw nothing. Just a narrow stretch of empty street disappearing into shadows between two old brick buildings. But the dog didn't blink. The growl deepened slightly. The tall man noticed it too. His posture changed almost immediately. The calm curiosity he had shown moments ago was gone. Now there was something sharper in his expression, something alert. He slowly straightened up from where he had been crouching beside the dog. Then he turned his head toward the same dark end of the street. For a few seconds, he said nothing. The woman could feel the tension rising in the air. Her voice came out quietly. "Do you see something?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached slowly inside his coat. The movement made the woman's stomach drop. But when his hand came back out, he wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a small flashlight. He clicked it on. A thin beam of light cut through the fog and stretched toward the shadows at the end of the street. The dog's growl stopped, but it didn't relax. Its entire body remained rigid, watching, waiting. The beam of light swept slowly across the pavement, across the walls of the buildings, across an empty alley entrance. Nothing, at least, nothing obvious. The man lowered the flashlight slightly, then he spoke quietly. "Someone was here." The woman frowned. "What do you mean?" He pointed the light toward the wet pavement. "Footprints." She stepped a little closer. The rain had left a thin, reflective layer across the road. And sure enough, there were faint marks, fresh ones. Someone had walked there recently, but they were heading away from the street, disappearing into the alley between the buildings, when the woman felt another chill run through her. "Do you think they were watching us?" The man didn't answer immediately. The dog suddenly took 2 steps forward, its nose lowered toward the ground, sniffing. Then it turned toward the alley. The man watched the dog carefully. His eyes narrowed slightly. This dog doesn't react like that for nothing. The woman swallowed nervously. You mean someone was really there? He nodded once. Yes. Then he added something that made her pulse jump. And they didn't want us to see them. The street fell silent again. The fog seemed thicker now. The woman suddenly became very aware of how alone they were. No traffic, no pedestrians, no sound except the faint ticking of the car engine behind them. She glanced at the man. You said this dog doesn't bring strangers to you. He nodded. That's right. So why did it bring me? For a moment, the man didn't answer. Yeah, he was watching the alley where the footprints disappeared. Then he said quietly, That's what I'm starting to wonder. The dog suddenly looked back at the woman. Its expression had softened slightly, as if trying to reassure her. But the tension in the air hadn't disappeared. Not even close. Because now the man seemed to understand something. Something the woman hadn't realized yet. Someone had been watching them. Watching the dog. Watching her. And whoever it was had slipped away the moment they realized they had been noticed. The man finally turned back toward the woman. His voice was calm again. But there was a weight behind it now. What's your name? The question caught her off guard. She hesitated, then answered quietly. I'd rather not say. For a moment, he studied her. Then he nodded slowly. Smart. The dog moved back toward them again. Still alert. Still watching the dark street. The man glanced toward the alley one last time. Then he spoke quietly. You shouldn't be out here tonight. The woman let out a nervous laugh. I was just trying to get home. He looked at the dog again. That dog might have just saved your life. Her breath caught. What? But before he could answer, the dog's ears lifted again. Sharp, focused. The man turned immediately. Because this time, they both heard it. Footsteps. Somewhere in the darkness. The alley was quieter now. Too quiet. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, and the faint glow of a distant street lamp reflected across the wet pavement like broken glass. The woman stood frozen beside the German shepherd. The dog's ears remained upright, its body stiff, eyes locked down the alley where the shadowy figure had disappeared moments earlier. She swallowed. Her heart was still racing. Who was that? She whispered under her breath. The dog didn't move, or it simply kept staring into the darkness. Then suddenly, it began walking again. Slowly, carefully, almost like it knew exactly where it was going. The woman hesitated. Everything inside her told her this was a bad idea. A very bad idea. But something deeper pushed her forward. Curiosity, fear, and a strange feeling that whatever was happening tonight was not a coincidence. So she followed. The alley twisted behind an abandoned warehouse district. Broken windows, rusting metal doors, trash blowing across the pavement, the kind of place where no one asked questions. The German shepherd stopped suddenly near a large metal dumpster, its nose lowered to the ground, sniffing. Then it looked toward a dark corner near a broken security gate. The woman stepped closer. Her breathing slowed. And that's when she saw it. A black sedan, parked in the shadows. Its engine was off, but its hood was still warm from recent use. She frowned. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. The dog walked toward the vehicle, slowly. Then it stopped beside the passenger door and growled. Low. Warning. The woman felt a cold chill crawl up her spine. Something about the car felt wrong. She looked around the empty alley. No movement, no sound. Just the quiet drip of rainwater from the fire escapes above. Then, the dog walked toward the trunk and sat, staring at it, waiting. The woman felt her stomach tighten. No, she whispered. Her hands trembled as she approached. Every instinct told her not to open it. But the dog kept staring, almost like it needed her to see something. Slowly, She reached for the trunk handle. Her fingers hesitated. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it echoing in her ears. Then she pulled. The trunk opened, and the moment it lifted, she gasped. Her entire body froze. Inside the trunk was a man, unconscious, his hands tied, a blood running down the side of his face, still breathing, but barely. The woman staggered backward in shock. "Oh my God!" The dog stood immediately, alert, protective. But something else happened at that exact moment, from the shadows behind them. Footsteps echoed, slow, heavy, deliberate. She turned, and her heart stopped. The same shadowy man from earlier stepped forward into the dim streetlight. Tall, broad shoulders, dark coat, calm, terrifyingly calm. Oh, and the moment his face became visible, the dog stopped growling. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, almost like it recognized him. The woman stared in confusion. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man didn't answer immediately. He looked at the unconscious man in the trunk, then at the dog, then finally at her. His voice when he spoke was low, controlled, dangerous. "That dog," he said slowly, just led you straight into something you probably shouldn't be involved in." The woman's heart pounded. "Who are you?" she asked again. The man stepped closer. The streetlight illuminated his face. Sharp features, a short beard, cold eyes that carried the weight of someone used to being feared. And when he finally spoke again, everything changed. "I'm the man," he said quietly. "People call the Mafia boss." The woman felt the air leave her lungs. And suddenly, she understood. And the dog hadn't been leading her randomly. It had been leading her to him. And to something much bigger than she ever imagined.
The alley erupted into movement. The three men advancing from the shadows spread out slowly, forming a loose triangle around the Mafia boss, the woman, and the German shepherd. Rainwater dripped from the metal fire escapes above. The streetlight flickered once, then steadied. The Mafia boss didn't move. His posture remained calm, almost relaxed, but his eyes had changed. Cold, focused, dangerous. The woman could feel the tension like electricity in the air. "Stay behind me," the Mafia boss said quietly. She obeyed instantly, stepping back beside the open trunk of the car. The German shepherd stood directly in front of them now, muscles tight beneath its thick fur. The dog's eyes locked onto the approaching men. One of them laughed. "So the rumors were true," the man said, the great Mafia boss wandering dark alleys alone. Another man glanced at the unconscious figure inside the trunk. "You already caught one of us," he said. "That wasn't very nice." The Mafia boss's voice remained steady. He talked. The men stopped walking. That single sentence had weight. Silence hung in the alley. Then the first man smiled. "Then we'll just have to clean up the mess." The man raised a gun. The woman gasped, but before he could fire, the German shepherd exploded forward, a blur of fur and muscle. The dog slammed into the man's arm, knocking the weapon sideways. The shot fired into the air. Chaos erupted. The Mafia boss moved instantly. In one smooth motion, he stepped forward and struck the second man with brutal precision, sending him crashing against the brick wall. The third attacker lunged forward, but the dog had already turned. It growled viciously, forcing the man backward. The woman stood frozen, heart pounding, watching everything unfold in seconds. Then, sirens, distant at first, but growing louder. The attackers heard them too. The first man shoved the dog aside and staggered backward. "This isn't over," he shouted. The three men ran down the alley, disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. The Mafia boss didn't chase them. He simply watched until they were gone. The German shepherd returned slowly, its breathing heavy, but its tail wagged slightly when it reached him. The Mafia boss knelt again. He placed both hands on the dog's head. For the first time that night, he smiled. You did good, he whispered. The woman finally spoke. What? What just happened? The Mafia boss stood, his voice softened. That dog just saved your life. She looked down at the German Shepherd. It looked back at her calmly. Suddenly, she realized something. You said the dog belonged to someone who disappeared. The Mafia boss nodded slowly. My younger brother. The woman's eyes widened. He was investigating those men, the Mafia boss continued. He disappeared 3 days ago. The rain slowed again. The alley grew quiet. And the dog? She asked. The Mafia boss looked down at the loyal animal. It escaped. He paused. And it's been trying to lead someone to the truth ever since. The woman slowly looked back at the trunk of the car, at the unconscious man, then back at the dog. So the dog brought me to you. The Mafia boss nodded, and you helped finish what it started. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then the Mafia boss reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a card. He handed it to her. If you ever need protection, he said quietly, call that number. She hesitated. Why would you help me? The Mafia boss looked down at the German Shepherd again, then back at her. Because the dog trusts you. He walked toward the black car, waiting at the end of the alley. 2 suited men stepped out from the vehicle, clearly part of his crew. They lifted the unconscious man from the trunk. The Mafia boss opened the back door, but before he stepped inside, the dog barked once. The Mafia boss turned. For a moment it looked like the dog might follow him, but instead, it walked back toward the woman and sat beside her. The Mafia boss chuckled softly. Well, he said, looks like you've got yourself a guardian now. The car door closed. The black vehicle disappeared into the rainy night. The woman looked down at the German Shepherd sitting beside her. The dog looked up, calm, loyal, like it had made its choice. She smiled faintly. Guess it's just you and me now. The dog's tail wagged slowly, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the city.
If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes kindness still exists in this world. This is Midnight Archives, where power meets humanity.